I'm not gonna lie, I've been struggling to write this video so much, and I've been re-recording this shit like a couple times, and I don't even know how this video gonna turn out. When we talk about the best action horror games, a few games might come to mind. Resident Evil 4 will be one of them. Resident Evil 5 might even come to mind. And hell, you may even think of games like Dead Space. But you better think of Bloodborne. Bloodborne is one of the best action horror games. And to me, it is the best action horror game. So what makes it so good? Is it the story? Is it the gameplay? Or is it both? The answer is both. Bloodborne is great because it has fast action and an aggressive gameplay, with chilling atmosphere, as well as delivering a story in ways that many games do not. A story that reveals horror through perspective and truth. In this video, I'll be talking into a lot more detail of how Bloodborne does this, and also why it's such a great action horror game. I should be clear that I will be mostly talking about the horror aspects of Bloodborne than the action. Sure, I'll give you a general idea of how Bloodborne gameplay works and why the action works as well as it does, but I'll mostly be talking about the horror. And I should also say that if you haven't played Bloodborne, you definitely should go pick it up before watching this video, because this video will contain spoilers, like major spoilers. Let's start with the gameplay, because this is where Bloodborne shows you why it's a great action experience. On the surface, Bloodborne is similar to any other Souls game or Souls-like. You kill an enemy, collect currency, dislike souls. In this game, it's called Blood Echoes. Literally, I had to learn it for this video, because I would definitely just call this souls. And you can use those Blood Echoes to buy items and level up. Combat in Bloodborne still has the core Souls formula, you know, trial and error, learn enemy patterns, get punished for mistakes. But here's the thing that sets Bloodborne apart. Just like everybody say, it's built around aggression. Everything about Bloodborne pushes you forward. The dodge mechanic isn't a roll like in other Souls game. It's a quick dash when you locked on. Great for closing distance. And I should also say that enemies in Bloodborne are way more aggressive than in your average Souls game. And they are also extremely unpredictable. And if you play too passive, you can easily get overwhelmed. This is a lesson I learned firsthand when I first got into Bloodborne, because I just got to playing Demon Souls and I thought it was gonna be the same as that, and I was just wrong. Bloodborne combat is really always about closing distance and putting pressure on your enemy. You get a gun, but it's not really used for long range. Instead, the guns are used for parrying, not for long range, because not only is the damage bad, the range is bad on most of these guns. Bloodborne weapons are usually quick and fast, great for applying pressure on your enemy. But as many of you already know, Bloodborne has transforming weapons, which can completely change your playstyle. And a lot of the weapons in the transformed state are a lot slower. For many of the weapon, changing it is actually extremely fast, so it makes it really easy to do it mid-fight, which can let you chain a sequence of devastating attacks. And yes, in Bloodborne you do get shields, and very few of you may be thinking, can I just use that to like play more passively? And then I ask you this question: have you never seen any video on Bloodborne ever, or just anything about the game? The shields are shit. You don't want to use them. In Bloodborne, the only defense is an amazing offense. And then we have the rally mechanic. Everybody watching this video may already know what the rally mechanic is. It's basically the game rewarding you for aggression. If you take damage, you have a chance to recover all or some of the health you lost. The game is basically telling you, don't run away and heal like a bitch, keep fighting. But there is a slight problem with blood vials in Bloodborne. Blood vials can make a lot what I said about aggression meaningless. You can farm and basically hoard blood vials, and they heal you percentage wise, which it is slightly a problem, because if you just hoard a shit ton of blood vials, you can play a lot passive than the game actually wants you. Hell, I did that on my first playthrough. But at the same time, I don't mind blood vials being like this, because they do let you slowly move into that more aggressive type of playstyle. But if you never get to that point, remember, that's not a you problem, that's the game problem, because blood vials themselves just work way too good. Again, they heal percentage wise, so even when you have a lot of health, they still gonna work pretty goddamn good. But it's also not just aggression. Bloodborne demands adaptability. Some enemies will change on your ass mid-fight. The Snatchers, for a perfect example, become way more vicious, and they already hit like a truck, but now they hit like a truck and they're fucking faster too. Then you have the Beastmen in Nightmare of Mensis and Nightmare Frontier, who just completely changed their fighting style. And then let's talk about the specific ones in Nightmare of Mensis. Those ones who seem like they're the exact same as the ones in Nightmare Frontier, but they actually themselves have new movesets. And then even when you get to beat them, some worm little thing would attack you, and it's not fun when it happens because you may dodge out of habit, but because you did dodge, the little brain with eyes that's building up frenzy is now directly attacking you, which is just not fun at all. So you basically have to adapt to the environment while also adapting to these new aspects of these enemies you should be familiar with. It's like Bloodborne knows Souls veterans. It knows that they will memorize patterns, but it's going to weaponize that against them. You can't just learn in Bloodborne. You have to change to the enemies, to the environment, and to the relentless push forward. That is Bloodborne at its core combat. Keep moving forward, keep hitting, and never get comfortable. I should say that enemy encounters are not where Bloodborne horror lies. Sure, you can get some enemies and bosses that look disturbing, grotesque beasts and towering monstrosities. The horror of Bloodborne lies in the truth of the world, and the truth seeps into the environment. When you first step into Central Yharnam, you're met with this breathtaking Victorian city, looming with architecture, gas lights, cobblestone streets, and surprisingly extremely clean to be a Victorian age city. But when you look closer, you see that the streets are filled with fear. Fear of outsiders, fear of beasts, fear of you. You can hear that in every Yharnamite voice, whether it's the ones you talk to or the ones that attack you. They're full of fear, and everything they do and say shows that. And that alone makes for a chilling atmosphere. But there is something else about Yharnam, and you really get to feel that once you make it to the Cathedral Ward. The Cathedral Ward is a place of faith, and you definitely feel that the moment you get there. But this is where Yharnam starts to not feel right, because you meet an enemy that's just completely out of place, doesn't belong in a gothic horror, and those are the brain suckers. These things are something alien. They're not something you see in a gothic horror, but when you meet them, you may shrug it off because you only see two of them, but they are hints that the world isn't what it seems. Then we make it to the Forbidden Forest. The Forbidden Forest is such a great area because this is where things start to fall apart. This is where you start to see the truth breaking through. The stage start familiar enough. Dark forest, hostile villagers, beasts, you've seen it all before. But the moment you encounter your first snakehead enemy, it all starts to feel wrong. The enemies you run into after this point are more of those snake people, as well as these snake. This is extremely different from what you've been dealing with so far in the forest. Even the environment itself changes a little. This shows you just how much more to the forest there is. But everything reaches its peak the moment you run into the Celestial Emissaries. These things damn sure don't belong in a gothic horror. They're blue alien little creatures, and some even shoot what looks like blue energy balls at you. And Byrgenwerth just really double downs on this feeling. Byrgenwerth architecture is back to the Victorian age, but everything else about Byrgenwerth is completely off, especially the enemies you meet here. You start off by running into these fly eyeball enemies that builds frenzy if they grab you. These things alone are completely off inside of your average gothic horror, but you also run into another brain sucker, which adds on to that alien. And then you run into whatever the hell that thing is. You only see this thing in Byrgenwerth if you don't go into the Chalice dungeons. That thing alone messes with everything you knew at this point, because what even is that thing? Look at it. What is that? But let's just say you do go to Nightmare Frontier first. Things get even stranger there, and it all starts with the amygdala that takes you there. This is the first amygdala you see, and it's just like that goddamn centipede thing, maybe even worse. It completely messes with everything you knew about the world so far, but it only gets worse from there, because you wake up in the lecture hall. The lecture hall is supposed to be a place of study, but when you walk inside of it, it's almost reality breaking. Why? Because it's too goddamn clean. It looks like no one studies here and no one learns here. I feel like no one has ever been here since it was built. And the fact that you run into enemies makes it even worse, because you see things are here, but the place itself is completely clean. Not to mention that the enemies you run in here are supposed to be the students, and just look at them. These are like slug creatures, and it just only gets worse from this point forward. Because you go into Nightmare Frontier. Nightmare Frontier is Nightmare Frontier. In Nightmare Frontier, gravity itself is confused because you see floating platforms, and hell, you yourself are on a floating platform. Nightmare Frontier architecture itself makes no sense because it looks like it's supposed to be a ruin, but you have things that just don't supposed to be where they are. You have tombstones in places where they don't belong, ruins where they don't belong. The landscape itself is completely out of place. It's like it makes sense, but then it makes zero sense. And the enemies themselves are completely confusing because you have these troll giant things that throw rocks at you. You have the beastmen that completely change up on your ass, like I mentioned. You have these tentacle squid looking things. You have the winter lancers who are assholes of their craft. And not to mention the boss is literally an amygdala. Nothing in Nightmare Frontier makes sense at all. It feels like a complete dream, and it only helps the fact that this is a dream because the name is literally Nightmare Frontier, and it comes right after the lecture hall. The lecture hall itself feels like a dream. With all of this, you see the cracks in the world. After defeating Rom, the veil finally lifts, and you see the truth of the world, and the truth is maddening. However, there is another way you can start to see the truth a lot earlier, and that's through insight. Insight is an in-game currency. With insight, you can buy upgrade material and armor and a lot of other stuff. But more than that, insight is a lore mechanic. With insight, you can see things that you couldn't see before. With insight, you learn to understand the world around you. If you have 40 plus insight, you'll be able to see that giant amygdala hanging on the cathedral ward's wall. This is something that was already there, and hell, it even attacked you before. You just couldn't see it before, but now you can. And once you see it, the world itself just feels so wrong. But no matter what, after you defeat Rom, you will be able to see the amygdala. And no matter what, after that point, the world you knew will begin to feel like a lie. But insight don't just let you get to see the amygdala. Insight also lets you be able to hear things you couldn't hear before, like a baby cries. And it also changes small things like enemy weapons, and it even makes enemies appear in areas where they weren't before. But the thing that's extremely important about all of this is most of this stuff already existed, you just couldn't see it or even comprehend it before. And because of all of this, the world itself started to feel extremely foreign to you. You started noticing things that were always there, but now it just has a completely different meaning. For an example, the amygdala statues in the Grand Cathedral. You may have not noticed them before, but now you do, because now you see it. And even things like the Odin Chapel now takes a completely different meaning, because you know that Odin is a great one, especially if you read item descriptions. This new perspective alone makes the entire world seem extremely foreign to you. In Bloodborne, knowledge and madness walk hand in hand. The more insight you gain, frenzy takes a faster hold. For me, one of the best areas in Bloodborne is Canehurst. I did Canehurst near the end, after the eldritch truth of Bloodborne shattered the old gothic world. Everything about Canehurst to me just felt so wrong, because it was connected to a world that was just proven to have been a lie. I was just waiting for something to happen, for something to be revealed, but it never did. Canehurst was almost a complete return to gothic horror, and generally I felt insane going through it. In contrast, we have the Upper Cathedral. This is my favorite area in Bloodborne. The atmosphere there is almost suffocating. It's eerie. It's like everything we've seen packed up in one place. But I also should say that this is my favorite area, not just because of the atmosphere. It's that after you discover much of what the Upper Cathedral has, you still feel like there's still so much this place is hiding from you. Similar to Bloodborne itself, even after you discover so much about its world, the mystery never fades. It continues to grow. Bloodborne's story isn't just a story about beasts, monsters, and alien gods. It's a story about us. It's a story about humans and how we destroy ourselves not out of cruelty, but with the very things that keep us moving forward. Our ambition, our faith, our curiosity, and hell, even our arrogance. All of these things that help push us forward also destroys us. In Yharnam, faith and arrogance are never truly separated. One plants the seed for the other. Faith hardened into arrogance, and arrogance transformed into devotion. And from that cycle, the city fell. It all began with Bergenworth arrogance, which was the foundation of everything that happened in Yharnam. After Wilhelm and his scholars discovered the existence of Great Ones, they didn't see the danger in that revelation. Instead, they saw the opportunity to ascend further, the opportunity to grab something that they didn't even understand. And for them, knowledge was the only way they could rise to something greater. Master Wilhelm heralded the knowledge. He was convinced that mastery over the cosmos was worth any price. But by the time he realized the cost, it was already too late. When we meet Wilhelm's mind is completely gone at this point. The only thing that's left is all of his regrets. And it's all because of his ambition to master something he didn't even understand. Oh, Lawrence. Lawrence was the student of Wilhelm. He carried their knowledge into the healing church as well as their arrogance. But he transformed their arrogance into faith. The old blood wasn't just a path to knowledge for Lawrence. Even with Wilhelm's warning, Lawrence treated it like it was humanity's salvation. And the healing church itself shared his devotion. They didn't just give the blood to others, they took it themselves, willing to share the risk it held. And it's almost like Lawrence didn't even care if he was going to ascend himself, because even after he saw the dangers of the old blood, he never treated it any different. And he became the first cleric beast. Even after all of the risk he saw, his faith never changed. And the same as him, the church's faith also never faded. After Lawrence, the goddamn founder, became a beast. We can perfectly see this through Vicar Amelia. She is currently the head of the church, but she still has strong faith in Lawrence and the old blood. We literally see that through her entire boss fight and when we enter the arena. But even then, we get to see that Lawrence didn't care more about his personal ascension. He wanted humanity to ascend. And because of his beliefs in the old blood and his beliefs in general, Lawrence and the Healing Church committed some of the worst atrocities in Bloodborne and was even the cause of the Beast Scourge. And Lawrence's end was a painful one because he was transformed by the very thing he believed in and sentenced to an eternity of suffering for his sins. The choir, a subsidiary of the Healing Church, went a different path than the Healing Church itself. Faith still guided most of their actions, but they wanted to commune with the very gods themselves. To try and reach them was their arrogance, but that arrogance was born from worship. They experimented on others, all with the purpose of gaining insight and contacting a great one. And then we're left with Mikolash and the School of Mensis, another subsidiary of the Healing Church. The School of Mensis' actions weren't driven by faith. It was just pure arrogance born from faith. And their arrogance became madness. Similar to Bergenworth and the choir, they sought ascension through insight and communion. And in their obsession to gain more knowledge, they put Margot, a stillborn Great One, in an undying state. They did this in hopes of luring a Great One. And one of the things that's sad, in their arrogance to contact the Great One, a Great One actually heard them, but she didn't give them what they wanted. And instead, Mensis drowned in their own madness. And when we meet Mikolash, he's completely insane. And the thing that's so frightening about this is it shows us the truth. Humans will always want more. We're gonna keep moving forward, always reaching for something beyond our grasp. That desire never disappears, it just changes its face. Sometimes we wear the face of faith, sometimes it's arrogance, sometimes it's love, sometimes it's hate. And Bloodborne does something that most stories usually never do. In most stories, faith and arrogance are treated as opposites. You can challenge the gods, or you can be faithful, but it's rarely both. Yet in Bloodborne, faith itself is arrogance. They're not enemies, but reflection of one another, each born from the same need that we are more, or we can be more than we actually are. The Great ones aren't terrifying because they're incomprehensible. It's quite the opposite. They're frightening because they are understandable. Their actions are driven by emotions we recognize all too well, and their behavior emulates ours a lot more than you actually would think. Let's start with the amygdala. These massive creatures loom over Yargul, the unseen village, and one is even present at the cathedral ward. Their behavior for many is the hardest to pin down, but when you think about it, they really just feel like researchers. They watch us, study us. When they attack, it never feels like it's out of malice. It could be because they want to see what happens, they want to see how you react. And it also could just be they feel threatened. Then we have the moon presence, who is probably the most dangerous great one. Not because she's violent, but because to us, we're nothing but her toys. She manipulates us, traps us, and directs events all for her own amusement. Moon presence is like that person that bothers smaller animals because they can. Sometimes it's out of curiosity, and sometimes they just want to feel like they're in control over this smaller thing's life. For moon presence, I feel like it's a mixture of both. She's both intrigued by us humans. She wanna see what we're capable of, but only when it's her stage. I named those two first because they can be viewed as the most cruel out of the great ones. The other great ones are literally defined by their emotions. Let's start with Abritus. Abritus was left behind by her own kin. When we see Abritus, she's completely lonely and grieving. She's a figure of mourning. And that pain makes her one of the most disturbing and tragic bosses in Bloodborne. Kaz is another example of a great one that's completely defined by her emotions. We don't get to see Kaz herself, only her corpse, but we can feel her anger and grief through Orphan and as we move through the fishing hamlet. And I should also say that I don't think that Orphan is her exact child. Orphan to me is Kaz's grief and anger given form, and his birth from her corpse represents a place of grief for every great one, because the game itself tells us that every great one loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate. That yearning drives them to human women, and because of that, the great ones commit some of the most monstrous acts in Bloodborne, such as impregnating women without consent. The great ones do this because some of them want to erase the grief of losing a child, and others may just want to avoid it altogether. And it also can be the same primitive instinct that drives all life: survival. Great ones aren't immortal, and Kaz is a great example of this. I saved Margot's wet nurse for last because I believe that wet nurse is technically Margot protecting herself. I don't think that wet nurse herself is the great one. When we cue wet nurse, the nightmare of Slain takes a while to appear because Margot is dying, and when it does appear, it doesn't appear for wet nurse, it appears for Margot. Margot shows us a story of a great one who never got to exist in the waking world, but she's still fighting for the little life she has, even if she's suffering. Many of the great ones' actions are driven by the same thing that drive humans in all life, whether it's survival, rage, grief, or even entertainment. And like I said, the thing that makes great ones scary is that they're us. One of the core rules about nature is it's survival of the fittest. The ones at the top get to choose what happens to the ones at the bottom. And in Bloodborne, humanity aren't the ones at the top, and great ones treat us almost the same way as we treat other animals. For them, Yharnam is nothing more than a zoo or a farm. They breed us out of a place of grief and survival, almost the same way as we breed other animals out of a place of care or survival. And sometimes they even use us for entertainment purposes. If you don't think humans do this, what world are you living in? And I'm sure the great ones most likely justify their actions the same way we do. I like to think they at least try to do that, since I like to think that they are us. They have both the good and the bad. So to justify it, I'm sure they say that they aren't smart enough, or they wouldn't get it, or they can't feel, or simply it's for our survival. Or even maybe they don't even care to justify it, they just do it. Alright, so I don't know what they're happening at the end of that section. For me, the scariest thing in Bloodborne isn't the beast, it's not the church, it's not Bergenworth, or even the great ones. It's you, the hunter, the player. From the moment you wake up in Yusufka's clinic, you're told to slay beasts, and so you do that. You adapt, you get faster, more aggressive, you don't give your enemy any moments to breathe, and without even realizing it, you become part of the suffering in Yharnam. In Bloodborne, you're not a bystander, you're not a janitor cleaning up the mess, or you're not fixing the pieces. You are one of the problems. And that shift happens the moment you kill Rom. Rom is one of the best bosses for this reason. Just this reason. Gameplay wise, she's shit, okay? I'm not even about to lie. But when you jump into the arena, Rom doesn't attack you. She may be a little on edge, but she doesn't attack you, and she even tries to flee. And when she does fight you, it's mostly because she wants to stop you and out of self-defense. When you kill Rom, you basically doomed most of those people you saved and sent to the Odin Chapel. And even the guy, Gilbert, the man who gives you the flame sprayer, wasn't your enemy, but after you killed Rom, you became the final piece to turn him into a beast. So I'm here to ask you the question, the player, why did you kill Rom? I'll give you some time to think about it because it's extremely important for later. If you notice, after Rom, many of the bosses started to change. You don't get beast anymore. Even though it's best to say that change happened with Vicar Amelia, but that don't work in context of this video. Instead, you get monstrosities born from human arrogance, like the One Reborn or the Celestial Emissaries. And hell, even Mikolash himself. Those bosses show us the horrors of Mensis and the Choir, but I don't want to talk about those bosses. I want to talk about the other ones. I want to look at bosses similar to Rom, bosses who are trying to protect something. Bosses like Margot's Wet Nurse, Martyr Ligarius, and hell, we can even throw the Shadows of Yharnam in this. Each of these bosses were trying to protect something and they weren't your enemy. I ask you this question, why did you kill them? This may actually be extremely easy to come up with, especially since I threw Martyr Ligarius in this. But there is one boss that I really like to talk about when bringing up this subject, and that boss is Abritus. Abritus isn't your enemy at all, and she is arguably the most innocent boss in Bloodborne. She is the cause of no one suffering, and she's just simply depressed and alone. And you, the hunter, decide to kill her, if you did. So I ask you, why? Abritus was optional. You did not have to kill her. She did not stand in your way, nor did she attack you first. You attacked her. So why did you kill her? And since I'm already making you question about the choices you made inside of the game, in Bloodborne you need 3 umbilical cords to get a specific ending. One of the ways you get that umbilical cord is through Ariana. If you decide to get the umbilical cord through Ariana, I generally ask you, why? Because you did this, you killed Ariana, someone who wasn't your enemy at all, so why did you do it? And if you say, I wasn't trying to kill her, so in other words, you were trying to kill an infant, a baby, something who was just born. And since you did decide to kill a baby, or hell, even kill Ariana, I ask you, why? But if you did decide to get your umbilical cord through Yusufka, I still ask you this question, why? But that may be one of the easiest ones to come up with. Even if you did kill a pregnant woman, you make it to the end, and Garmin will offer you mercy. If you decide to submit, you become free from the dream, but not free from the world. Your actions are almost completely meaningless because it really changes absolutely nothing. But at the same time, it does free you in some way. But if you decide to resist, I ask you the question again, why? Because you didn't face German, and one of the most emotional boss fights happened. You're fighting someone who's trying to protect you from his fate. So why did you decide to fight him? Maybe you were trying to free him, or maybe you had your own reason. But after you defeat German, Moon Presence soon arrive, and she embraces you, and you become a puppet of the system, similar to German. You freed German, but trapped yourself. And just like the other ending, most of your actions are meaningless because nothing changed. But if you consume 3 umbilical cords before facing German, you have a chance to actually face Moon Presence. And once you defeat Moon Presence, your hunter becomes a great one. For many people, this is the scariest ending because they feel that the hunter becomes something entirely different and loses every ounce of humanity that they had. Well, I'm here to tell you that in Bloodborne, the hunter becomes a monster long before they become a great one. And I ask you those questions to kinda help you realize that it's almost impossible to answer them in a way that's morally right. And I feel the simplest answer is the hunter is a beast. One of the perfect ways the game show this is with the prey slaughtered. After you defeat a boss, you will get prey slaughtered. with the exception of 2, Moon Presence and Margot's Wet Nurse. This is a mirror reflecting every life you took in your pursuit. The hunt itself extends beyond Beast. Like I said, after Ram, but more Ricker Emilia, you don't get Beast anymore. You get bosses that are trying to protect something. But no matter what, no matter if these bosses are trying to protect something, no matter if they aren't your enemy, you always get prey slaughtered. Even if the bosses are almost innocent like Abritus, or are just people like Ariana, they're caught in your obsession, in your hunt. Even if you feel that your hunter has a motive, even if you created a motive for your hunter, no matter how noble or personal that motive may be, it doesn't erase the truth. The hunter is a predator, and the act of hunting turns them into a beast, the very thing they were supposed to destroy. And Bloodborne makes you face that reality, that uncomfortable truth. For me, it's horrifying to realize that the person I hoped shaped became something I don't even recognize. No matter what ending you choose, that fact still remains. And in one of those endings, that beast became something even more. Well, anyway, that's all I have for this video. If you liked this video, you can give it a like. If you didn't, thank you for the watch time. If you notice, I haven't really talked about the DLC because, again, this video is mostly about the horror aspects of Bloodborne and not the tragedy of Bloodborne. The DLC is definitely where the action of Bloodborne really does shine because it makes up for what the base game was lacking, especially with boss fights. Definitely what Bloodborne was missing. But at the same time, the DLC does drop the horror of Bloodborne. The horrifying atmosphere is not present in any of the areas. It's mostly a tragic atmosphere than a horror atmosphere. So yeah, I'm not gonna talk about that for that one reason right there. But anyway, if you like anything horror game related, you can think about subscribing. And also, if you want me to talk about anything, more Bloodborne, some more Resident Evil, hell, even another game, just write it down in the comments. If it's a game I don't have, I'll fucking tell you that shit.